So here we're going to talk about the limbic system and neuroanatomy. We're going to focus on emotion and memory. We're going to talk about the hippocampus, the Papez circuit, perforant pathway, and then we'll touch on the olfactory system as well. When it comes to the limbic system, there's a limbic gyrus, which comprises the cingulate gyrus and the parahippocampal gyrus. When it comes to the cingulate gyrus, anteriorly, we think about motivation and behavior. Posteriorly, we think about learning and memory. Then when it comes to the parahippocampal gyrus, this channels information into the hippocampus, which is what we're going to learn about soon. There's an intralimbic gyrus, which holds the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is the center for emotion. The hippocampus is the center for memory. This is a quick setup so that we can get an overview of how these structures interact. So the amygdala anteriorly here, almond shape, center for emotion. Hippocampus behind it, we'll see in coronal view how it's seahorse shaped, center for memory. And we call it the file clerk for reasons that we'll talk about momentarily. So we have an experience, whatever it is then tracked into the hippocampus. The hippocampus then sends that information to the cingulate gyrus where it's processed. And then as it's processed, the memory is stored in different domains within the brain in relation to whatever that memory is. So if it's a visual memory, it's going to be stored in the occipital lobe. And then that lobe, that region of the brain, interacts with the hippocampus ultimately to retrieve the memory when we need to bring it to consciousness. So let's talk about hippocampal anatomy. It's helpful to set up this seahorse shape first. There's the fimbria here of the fornix, and we'll see how the fornix communicates with the Papez circuit. Then there's this dentate gyrus, this little C-shaped hook here with this hippocampal sulcus separating it. Then there's the cornu ammonis with its 4 different divisions. Remember, CA1 is particularly important for hypoxic ischemic injury. It's susceptible to anoxia. Then there's the subicular complex, and we'll talk about its relationship in the perforant pathway. Then the entorhinal cortex, which we'll see how this channels information from the parahippocampus to the hippocampus. And then the fusiform gyrus itself here. There's this concept of prosopagnosia and inability to recognize familiar faces, and that relates with the fusiform gyrus. Now hippocampal physiology, and we're going to break this down into an extra-hippocampal circuitry system here, the Papez circuit, and then we'll talk about an intra-hippocampal one. So extra-hippocampus, entorhinal cortex, the information enters from the parahippocampus, it goes into the hippocampus, out via the fornix to the mammillary nuclei of the hypothalamus. It's then spit forward to the anterior thalamic nucleus here. We talked about in the diencephalic overview how the anterior thalamic nucleus communicates with the limbic system. Then the information is sent to this limbic gyrus here, which then interacts with the neocortex. Remember, the cingulate gyrus sends the information to different domains within the brain where the memory is stored, and then the memory is retrieved back with communication with the hippocampus. And we can see this set up here, where entorhinal cortex to hippocampus to mammillary nuclei to anterior thalamic nuclei to cingulate gyrus, and then the whole thing cycles. When it comes to the perforant pathway, this is how information is shuttled through the hippocampus itself. It's sent from the entorhinal cortex, which is in the parahippocampus, to the dentate gyrus, to the cornu ammonis, to the subiculum, and then from the subiculum out to the fornix, and that's what we see here, and this is how it connects with these extra-hippocampal structures. Here we just consolidate this information, dentate gyrus to CA3 to CA1 via Schaffer collaterals, and then to the subiculum. And we point out here, this is the entorhinal cortex, again, of the parahippocampus, and then this is the fornix here, relating the extra-hippocampal and intra-hippocampal circuitry. Olfactory system, just want to quickly point out that the olfactory nerves are these little neuron and extensions here that go through the cribriform plate. The olfactory bulb and olfactory tract here are actually part of the cerebrum itself. They're part of the cerebral cortex. So when it comes to the olfactory nerves, they lie within this olfactory epithelium. And you can see that here. There's this mucus layer here, and then they extend through the cribriform plate to the glomerulus of the olfactory bulb. So that's a quick trip through the limbic system, really important for things like motivation, emotion, and memory.